everyone, and welcome to This is Recruiting. Welcome to the webinar. If you are joining us for the first time today, we are Hackerearth. We conduct a webinar series called This is Recruiting. We invite the best in the industry to come and give us, a little bit of insights and share their stories into their journey as a recruiter and different aspects of the entire recruiting cycle. If you've never heard about Hackerearth before, we are a global company that helps recruiters, such as yourselves, attract, screen, and interview the best tech talent. We do this because of our platform that has coding assessments, interviews with real-time code editors, and hackathons to continuously engage your tech talent. So if you're looking to speed up your hiring cycle and increase your hiring efficiency, we've been known to increase your hiring efficiency by up to 66%. We can speed up your hiring cycle by over 50%. And if any of what I just said, resonates with you, drop me a message. We'll get talking about it. Or you can visit our website. It's there on the corner there, hackerearth.com/recruit. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very important guest and speaker for today, Jason Vorie. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you. I think, when we first started communicating, you told me about, all the incredible adventures you've had as a recruiter and the many experiences that you have to share. So why don't you, give us a little bit of an introduction and tell us about yourself and what's it been like so far?
All right, absolutely. I appreciate that introduction. Well, hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're just going to get a little bit into international recruitment and my personal experiences. I started recruiting about 10 years ago. I was an international student in Munich, Germany. And while I was attending school, we had to do an internship. And the course and curriculum was in English. And luckily, there was a German recruitment company owned by a young English lady called Manning Global. So if you ever Google Manning Global, you'll see some of their work, that they do around the world. So I started with them for about 3 years, just doing simple database entry. Back in 2010, I actually physically had to take every resume by hand, and I had to input every single bit of data by hand into a database. So if you could imagine spending 8 hours a day typing in John lives in Amsterdam. So I spent 3 years doing that, and I did well enough after I finished college to be invited to open an office in Croatia, in the city of Zagreb. So due to the costs of operation in Zagreb, you can actually acquire 3 to 4 educated recruiters for the price of one in Germany. So a lot of bigger companies and recruitment companies are now recruiting talent in other countries due to this fact, right? They have dual master's degrees, but you can actually get the salary at a fraction of a price. So something to think about for any of you hiring global recruiters, pricing in other countries. So I spent 2 years in Croatia. Our clients during those 5 years were Samsung, Huawei, ZTE, and my main client was Huawei, so a Chinese organization. So I spent a lot of time working in different countries around Europe, England, Amsterdam, Switzerland, Austria, Germany, I think about 17 countries in total. And so we staffed a lot of telecommunication projects. We ended up with the Vodafone project. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the German Vodafone project, the largest 5G upgrade in Europe went on. I think we hired 1,500 contractors and full-time employees within a year. So that kind of brings us into some of these questions, right? What are some of those barriers on recruiting internationally? How do you overcome some of those? the main thing is understanding where you're recruiting, right? When I was recruiting in Germany, your notice period is 3 months, right? So if you can imagine an interview process with a 3-month notice period or a 2-month notice period. So that's something, really to understand and, kind of take into consideration as opposed to America where it's a 2-week process. In other countries, it can be as quick as a day. So yeah, from Germany to Croatia, and then I eventually made my way back to America, and I was an on-site HR coordinator for mergers and acquisitions. So I spent 2 years in Houston, Texas, building an underground fiber project. And the big challenge was that is we were importing European contractors to work the project. So then we got involved with all these different visa situations, green cards, blue cards, and spent 2 years building that project. Took a break, became an entrepreneur for a couple of years, building up a recycling project. And, the call of recruitment just came back. The tech world is booming right now. TikTok is at the top of the mountain, technology-wise, attraction-wise. So right now I'm in a good place. For about a year, I've been with TikTok, recruiting in the local US market. So yeah, that's about it about me for now. Does anybody have any questions? What are the best channels to source candidates globally, especially underrepresented countries? So I put a little bit of thought into this. When you're sourcing underrepresented countries and globally, I take an inside out approach, right? Standard recruitment is always mine and source, attract candidates, and then push them towards the client or organization you're working for. But in smaller countries, this is not an easy task to accomplish, right? There's not a large presence on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of GitHub or other tech avenues or channels to grab these candidates from. So I was sourcing for a project in Brazil, for instance. And in Brazil, hiring contractors was a very challenging situation, mainly because contracting is not, the word is, they don't use contracting. They use different terminologies. So for about a month, I'm looking for contractors and nobody understood LLC. Nobody understood how are you going to bill me? The entire process was different. So I actually physically had to go into the company I was working with, Huawei, down in Brazil, and kind of take that approach on discussing with locals and people that were already working at the time in the company, and got a network built that way. Just kind of shooting the breeze and chatting. And next thing you know, there was a small referral pipeline that slowly built up over time. Another good approach for underrepresented countries is social media. It's also become a large part of recruitment is Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. A lot of these countries that don't have a large tech job board presence, you can actually go on social media, create job postings on that way, just as you can in Facebook here in the States, and just really immerse yourself in the local culture. And, you go to India and you go outside to a coffee shop and you say, hey, I need an engineer. Right? It's 100 people. I'm an engineer, but you go to Brazil or Philippines or somewhere, and you're going to have more of a challenge finding that, tech level talent. So yeah, social media, local CRM databases. I had a lot of trouble finding candidates, so I partnered with some local organizations that offered contractors. So I would call them up, pick their brains about what they offered, become partners with them, and then use their local database in the country that I was looking for, whether it was, a smaller country, even sometimes larger. Like here in the States, you can partner up with a lot of these organizations that offer contractors, and they can do some of the work for you, but obviously taking a piece of your profit margin. So yeah, social media, local CRM pages, government databases, right? A lot of these underrepresented countries have government databases you can search. Contractors have to register with them. Other recruitment agencies have to register. So you can mine some candidates from that avenue as well. Second question, we'll move on from best channels to source candidates globally. Here is the approach towards high volume hiring across the globe, especially for developers. So high volume recruitment, right? That's always the thing. It's all slow and things aren't moving quickly at first. And then all of a sudden, bam, I need 100 contractors within the next month and a half. So this process is best done pre-mapped. A good example here is going back to that Vodafone project in Germany, right? We needed to hire 1,500 contractors in 8 months. And so in Germany, with that sort of timeline and also that sort of a notice period, 2 to 3 months in that market, extremely difficult. But as we pre-mapped the process and we also collected documents and verified documents pre-screening, so there was a lot of work that was put in pre-screening before they were subbed to the client, right? Our client here was Tech Mahindra. So Tech Mahindra is really where I made that move from telecommunications recruitment, right? 5G, tower builds, RAN engineers. And then all of a sudden this emergence comes in, right? IT and telecoms are now merging. And so an IT services organization like Tech Mahindra can come in and now they can grab a piece of all these different telecoms projects going on. Oh, did she come back? Oh, there you are. And so
I'm so sorry, a bit of a problem, but thank you so much for starting off with the questions. Yeah, please go ahead with the developer hiring.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is the high volume hiring, especially developers, obviously a pre-mapped plan. Gathering those documents, validating those visas, all pre-sub to the client, and even large packages of candidates, instead of one at a time, group them together in 5, 10, 20 and get the volume across that way. That way the hiring manager is not having to open up individual emails and spend a lot of time going through them throughout his day. So packaging that nice and neat, getting large groups of candidates together and getting them across. And also speak on a personal level with these developers, right? A high volume recruitment can seem a bit of a rush, and these developers can be sometimes a little bit touchy, especially ones that are in high demand. So really just speak with them on a personal level about their family lives. One thing I learned about recruitment from a very early point was every conversation is a general conversation, right? If you're on the phone, hey, where do you work? What do you do? How many years you been doing it? What's your tech stack? Okay. It's not good. Start it off with a warm, hi, how are you doing? How's the weather today? Just an icebreaker. That way they feel comfortable with you. You're not just another recruiter. I can't tell you how many deals that I've closed just due to the fact that the talent enjoyed my conversation and the way that I treated him throughout the process. Hands down, the best approach to recruitment is keep every conversation a general conversation, especially with developers. And also using technology, apps and software. Where are we here? We're on a platform helping us get our job done quicker, faster, and more efficiently. So this technology, these apps, this software that comes into play, it's all so simple and it's made so navigable. You can really navigate these sites easily, get the documents in easily. So really that pre-mapped process, use your technology, your apps, your software, speak on a personal level with these developers, understand their family situation, especially if they have to move and relocate. The only way you're going to make that happen quickly is really have a good relationship with them.
I think so. We have a question in that's just come in. So someone, Nivin, I think, was keen to hear what your tech stack is, because you mentioned it while discussing high volume recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, my personal tech stack falls really on the back end, right? Python, Java, C++ developers. Starting to get into this database and MySQL, NoSQL, data analytics, data science is a big thing right now. I also am very keen on DevOps, CI/CD, pipeline build. A lot of these different cloud environments. Here at TikTok, we have our own cloud native application, right? So trying to explain to developers that we're not built on Azure or, Google Cloud Platform or AWS can be challenging. So yeah, really in this DevOps, this back-end developer environment coding. Here at TikTok, we have a very intense hiring process, right? There's two coding so there's two HackerRank coding assessments. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this new LEET code, right? LEET code is kind of the word of the day. This is that bash scripting, that troubleshooting environment. So yeah, I'm really into the back-end infrastructure engineering.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question, I think, we were discussing onboarding just before we started the webinar. And, you were talking about how there's different types of onboarding across different countries. And, just want to get some insight into the onboarding process itself. How have you experienced it across different countries? How has it been across Europe? How is it different from, working in India versus in the US?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, onboarding is always the gray area, right? That's where we lose a lot of our candidates, is in this onboarding process. You speak with them and everything is a go. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to negotiations and interviews, it can be a real a challenging part of the process. So across different countries, the main thing is to understand your client, right? I worked with Huawei, which is a Chinese company at first, and then I moved into Tech Mahindra, which is an Indian company. So the onboarding process was completely different for both, right? The Indian client seemed a little bit disorganized, but things always seem to get done on a whim, and things can get done quickly if they need to get done. And so once I understood the chaos and how things kind of come together at the end, which was different for me, I was used to a clean cut process. Here's the timeline. We're hiring on this date, and this is when I need them to start. But, and in the Indian culture, sometimes things can get changed around and they seem to go with it, right? So I learned that, and it made onboarding a lot easier. That way I was able to discuss with the potential candidates, instead of using the language, you're going to be interviewed next week, we're going to hire on the 5th and you're going to start on the 10th. It's, hey, we're going to get around to reviewing your resume in a week or two, and then we'll set, and so I set that expectation, right? So onboarding is all about expectation. You tell these guys something in your initial conversation with them, and something changes in that process. Guess what? You just lost the deal because you didn't know your information on the onboarding process. And it's different across different countries. As mentioned before, Germany, 2 to 3 month notice period. But then you go down to Brazil and they'll quit their job tomorrow and start the next day. So that again, the different countries really, and with the Chinese culture, right? I would visit the office in England, Green Park, just outside of London. They have a beautiful office. And during lunch, all of the employees would sleep. Right. So I'm trying to get things done. I'm trying to get things done during lunch, and I'm trying to call candidates, and there's 600 Chinese people sleeping at their desk. and so this was something I had to get used to, right? So again, with the different onboarding processes, just understand social norms with the clients and organizations you're working with, and then also understand the terminology that you're using, when you're discussing timelines and when you're discussing expectations of the role. Just really heed caution when approaching that.
Right. And with onboarding, I think the thing that recruiters struggle with is, it's not just you who's carrying out the onboarding. You're coordinating with like the hiring manager, you're coordinating with the candidate, you're coordinating with a bunch of different people. And, in an organization, and you worked at, a couple of big organizations, I'm sure there's always been more than one stakeholder who's had to be a part of this entire process. So what are your tips on, coordinating with different hiring managers? Is there some sort of tool you can use to, just make sure everyone's on the same page? Is it, do you have different processes set in place to make this easier?
Yeah. My biggest way to overcome this is I set up small chat groups, right? And so here at TikTok, I have a variety of different managers. When I worked with Manning Global, I had a variety of different managers and companies, right? Here at TikTok, it's just TikTok. As I work in-house, and then working with Manning Global, I was working with clients. So anywhere from 4 to 6 clients at once. So coordinating with the different hiring managers was all about communication. That's all it boils down to. So once I organized and set up small chat groups with the different hiring managers, it allowed me to effectively understand their needs. And it also allowed me to understand how they work, right? Every hiring manager is different. Some hiring managers are just all over the place and you got to follow their lead. And some hiring managers just want you to simply get it done, right? So that communication and that open line of communication is not always so easy to get. Right. For the first couple months here at TikTok, I wasn't allowed to speak to the hiring managers. Right. There was a gatekeeper. There was another TA involved. So now I'm trying to get information from the hiring managers through a third party. Okay. So my best advice here would be to open up small individual group chats, whatever platform you're using, whether it's People or, Google, just really communicate effectively. Otherwise, if you kind of leave it up in the air and you leave it up to these hiring managers to come back to you with information, you could be running in circles, especially in different countries when they're not in a hurry and you think they are, because your manager may be on your tail to reach your KPIs. And that right. comes into that may be a contractual thing, right? Hey, this hiring manager is not allowing me. The hiring process here at TikTok takes 2 months, right? So I lose 80% of my candidates in that process, whether they fail out in the coding interview or 2 months they get eaten up by Meta or Google or Amazon. So communication, just small, individualized group communication or on an individual level.
Right. So I think what's interesting is that last bit you mentioned about, having to close candidates fast because they might get, poached by someone else. There's always another company that's on their tail there, someone waiting, to hire developers, especially because they're in huge demand. I think someone asked us a question here, what is your strategy to close tech talent? So how do you, seal the deal, make sure that they're not moving away, especially with developers who are in crazy demand right now?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little cliche. I mean, it really all boils down to money with these. I mean, it's a sad turn of events, right? Before these developers were not, as in demand. It was just the good ones. But now, even down to new grads, it's competition for these. So luckily, I work for TikTok, and we got a lot of money. So it's not quite as challenging. But again, it all just comes back to it's two things. It's money and career advancement with these tech guys, right? They either want a new tech stack or they want to use skills that they're not currently using. I mean, all day long I talk to these guys, and I'm at Amazon, I'm stuck in this department, I want to come over to TikTok. You guys are doing some great things with this, NLP and AI stuff. And so really piquing their interest with what your organization has to offer, right? What tech stack that developer is going to be able to utilize and gain skills on. I mean, all day long, that's the main attraction to TikTok. It's the tech stack. It's, what are you guys doing, on this technology front? And I want to take a peek at it. So really managing the technical expectations and then the financial expectations. How many candidates do you lose on that negotiations at the end? So it's really important to understand your budget, right? That's always the push pull, right? I this guy wants this, but he wants this, and so if there's a hard number and a communication, tech stack and money. Just keep that in mind with these developers, tech stack and money.
Yeah. So talking more about, hiring developers, and this is something we touched upon, a little while back also, in terms of remote onboarding and how it's been like over the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic. And I think, it's important to cover this when you're dealing with like a global organization, because you can't always go to another country, recruit people, and then come back. And I think a lot of remote onboarding as well is a challenge right now. And we've heard that quite extensively from our recruiter community. So how has your experience been? Do you have any tips for our audience as to what works best when you're dealing with remote hiring?
Yeah. So everybody's at home, right? These physical interactions and these signing your contract in the hiring manager's office has now disappeared, and it's all become a virtual signature and conversations and Zoom meetings. So with remote hiring, it really comes down to preparedness, right? So if I don't understand my company's process 100% on how it goes down, and I don't relay that information, like, okay, this is how it's going to work. You're going to have 3 technical interviews. You're going to have a final behavioral interview. After that, an offer will be made, and after that, you've got 1 week to decide, right? So now from that initial conversation, that remote hiring process is given to the candidate, right? And that way, your communication going forward is all based off that initial Loctite process, right? So that candidate never has to second guess what happens after this step. Okay, I just finished my 3rd technical interview. How much longer do I have? Who do I talk to next? Right? So I share this document with all my candidates, and it maps out that remote hiring process. Yeah, 90% of them, 95% of them don't make it, but 100% of them all are aware of my remote process hiring from the beginning. So that's really the long and the short of it, is to understand 100% what your organization's remote hiring process looks like, communicate that to the potential candidate on the very first call, and stick to that script from beginning to end.
I think that's actually a really great tip because so I myself a couple years ago just when I started working, I too had to go through, remote onboarding because of the whole pandemic. And I was just in a constant state of panic because I had no idea which process comes next. Like I thought, okay, I finished one interview. What happens next? Do I go forward? Am I in? Do I wait for another call? Is it done? And it was just panic nonstop. So I think it's a great tip to, let your candidates know beforehand that this is the process. And yeah, maybe you're not going to make it, but at least you know what's going to happen. I'm not sure why. I think some recruiters find it more mysterious to not tell everyone, don't give them the next step. Never let them know your next move.
Yeah, yes. And also pre-screening, right? So with Tech Mahindra, we had to acquire all visas prior to submitting the candidate. So if there's anything that you can take care of to make the hiring and remote hiring process easier, go ahead and take care of that. So even before the candidate was sent to my client, I would already have their paperwork in order. I would already have their confirmation on their LLC organization. If it was a contractor, I would already have references in hand. By that time when I handed the candidate over to a hiring manager, it's a small package and making life easier for my client or the company I'm working for. Doing as much as you can do personally to help that hiring manager. Because at the end of the day, as a recruiter, what's our goal? Just put a butt in the seat. And that's it. It's not technology. It's just people putting people to work, and remote hiring just needs to be done just very communicatively.
Right. So I actually had another question which I wanted to ask you before, but because of my whole Wi-Fi trouble, I didn't get to it. When we were talking about channels for social recruiting, so for technical recruiting itself across the globe, I think being from TikTok, I'm sure you would have expected a question on TikTok resumes and, sourcing candidates through TikTok itself. So how are TikTok resumes working out for you? Does TikTok themselves, use it frequently? And how do you, shift through multiple applications that way?
Yeah. So here at TikTok, we have a two-step process before getting to the hiring manager. So the first conversation is obviously with a recruiter. Here at TikTok, we're very lucky to have large volume of resumes coming in, right? So for a lot of years working for Tech Mahindra and Huawei, it was 90% of just trying to find that one needle in a haystack. But now it's the reverse, right? Now I'm here at TikTok, I get 1,000 resumes a day. And so how do I decide who gets the phone call and who doesn't? Right. So, I just take that into consideration. Sorry about that. I really we moved through that process through an eval panel. Right. So now we've constructed these panels. So all the resumes go through the recruiter, they're screened, then they go to an evaluation panel. The evaluation panel screens the resumes a second time, and then they make their way to the hiring manager. So that whole process has just really eliminated the hiring manager speaking to somebody who's not qualified. And it also eliminates me not getting any feedback, right? So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just getting more and more hectic because every day more and more college grads are graduating, and we have two separate programs. So now I'm dealing with college grads and then also, seasoned developers.
Right. So, I mean, you've got your hands full clearly.
Yeah, after all those years of spending time just trying to pull in talent and convince them that my client was who they wanted to work for,
Yeah.
and now to be in a position of working for the client that everyone wants to work for. I really would encourage all tech recruiters to aim and to shoot for getting in with an organization like Google or Apple or TikTok or Meta or Amazon, because it just makes your job easier and more fun, right? So now I get to learn about these technologies, and I get to have conversations with hiring managers and teams about, what's on the forefront of TikTok. Where are we going? This NLP, environment, this AI environment is really cool.
Awesome.
We have a saying. We have one saying here at TikTok: we want to automate ourselves out of work.
That's a nice thing.
I think so.
So I'm going to open up questions now to our audience, and we've got quite a few that's already come in. The first one, hey Jason, would like to understand how GitHub is helpful to hire at TikTok?
Yeah, so a lot of these portfolios, right, that are constructed in GitHub around certain coding skills and development of code. So especially on these back-end positions that we're looking for, like kernel developers and C++ developers, GitHub is just a good tool to judge how far along the candidate is in their experience, right? So they can understand, can they really deconstruct a data set or an algorithm. I mean, 90% of these candidates think they can pass this HackerRank skills assessment. But when you're presented with 2 questions and 30 minutes to solve them, and you've got to code your way through it, GitHub can be a great tool to say, okay, hey, this guy's going to do great on that coding assessment. Because especially with Amazon, a lot of Amazon employees, like cloud employees and DevOps guys at Amazon, they're all operational, right? And so when I hire DevOps here at TikTok, they have to take a coding skills assessment. And so, that GitHub really helps me understand what level the candidate is at.
Right. I hope that answers your question, Mohammed Aslam. We have another question here. Hi, Jason. Wondering if you got any tips for attracting candidates, especially UX and UI professionals, and finding talent on LinkedIn.
Yeah, UIUX, on the front end, those Angular technologies, that is a very difficult position to recruit for. I had a project in Europe that was recruiting for them, and the best way that I found was to cast a broader net on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn searches were very specific, certain technologies, companies they worked for. But then as I got into it and I just casted my search broader, I minimized my skills requirements, and I was able to search and find candidates that weren't necessarily working for big name companies, but had the right skills. LinkedIn is a great tool, but you really, really have to manipulate the search and filter category to find the good candidates. Because if you just are using the basics, software engineer, Linux experience, UI, UX, So my best, I guess, advice for this would be to cast a wider net for UI/UX and try to pick off some of the talent that's not working for, huge companies. Unless you work for a huge company and you're trying to steal them.
Right. So I think we have another quite personal question. What's been your biggest challenge as a recruiter so far, given, your experience? And I mean, I could have just pointed out at least 100 different things from what you were talking about, recruiting 700 developers and onboarding and like everything in between there. Everything seems pretty daunting, but what's been your, biggest challenge so far?
My biggest challenge was understanding the difference between a developer and a tech person on a web enterprise level, as opposed to a tech person in a virtualized mobile cloud environment, right? So there's this difference between an HTML, CSS, JavaScript IT professional as opposed to a C++ virtualized storage TikTok talent, right? So to understand that difference between a web enterprise IT developer as opposed to a virtual machine environment, mobile, that was been my biggest challenge. I mean, I spent years and years just, hey, he's a Java developer. Hey, he knows how to use AWS. Hey, he develops websites. Man, but to really understand the environment, especially with the telecoms merging with the IT, it was huge to go from RAN engineers to Java developers and virtualizing, because all this cloud storage is, all these data centers now all have to be migrated and virtualized. So, yeah.
I think that connects pretty well to the next question that we have. What would your suggestion be to a technical recruiter who comes from a non-technical background? I think, just mentioning all the different things you need to learn.
Yeah,
I mean, there are quite a few people.
That's a good question. So the main thing is, right, a lot of times we don't know what these guys are talking about, right? We're not engineers. We're not data science majors. We're not PhD candidates. So if a non-tech recruiter, right, say you're doing healthcare or you're doing sales recruitment, right? It's the same concept, right? A sales guy has to have this many years of sales experience. They're working for this type of environment with this type of product, right? So there's your JD for your sales guy. But now as you get into this tech world, you just have to familiarize yourself with the concept of full stack, right? So full stack is back end, front end. Right. So if you just go and spend a few days, buy a book on full stack software development, you actually start to see how easy the layers are, right? The bottom layer, the developers, you just learn Java, Python scripting, and then you move into the DevOps, the taking that information and virtualizing it. And then you just start to, and they're all buzzwords, right? CI/CD, C++, Linux. You just really need to, it took me a while to understand, okay, Linux is a software that servers are spun on, right? And so, so that made me realize, oh God, Jason, you keep sending all these candidates who are great developers, but no Linux experience. So I had to learn, okay, what is Linux? Linux is a program. It needs system line commands, right? And so as you get deeper into the tech, just really understand full stack, start there. But migrating from, to get into tech recruitment, the money shift is huge, right? I mean, I went from making, $10, on a whatever, on a draw, commission based, doing sales, healthcare. And then you start to move into tech recruitment, and all of a sudden you're making $40, $50, $60 an hour. You're making more than these engineers are making, right? But it's just all about that tech knowledge, right? I had to grasp the concept of web, IT development person to mobile technologist, right? But there's levels to it, but it's just simple. Keep it simple. Back end development, front end development. How do they communicate?
I hope that answers your question. We have another question here. Have you ever experienced talent pooling through a project or event? Here, I'd have to add that, since we do have hackathons and hiring challenges as Hackerearth, you can get your talent through that, similar with our coding assessments and hiring challenges in general. But enough of our product. Jason, have you experienced talent pooling through a project or event?
Talent pooling as far as sharing talent with other companies, or as far as having like a hiring event?
I think this is in line with the hiring event, and I'm sure with TikTok there's probably a lot of hiring events. So at times you probably don't need one because you're getting that many resumes in.
Yeah. We separate new college grads into a separate department. So we actually have an entire recruitment department specifically geared towards college grads due to all the visa situations and OPTs and F1s. But as far as like a pooling event, we really don't have any sort of innate or solid process. And we have like online events, right? You'll see if you go on LinkedIn, TikTok is having a speaker or somebody discussing a social issue. But as far as like, I haven't come across a whole lot of success having those sort of, events. But yeah, at TikTok, we don't have too many pooling events to where we all get together. What's really cool we do have though is a lot of the candidates that are good candidates that do not, we have thousands of open jobs. So, it's incredibly frustrating as a recruiter when you're recruiting for a C++ senior developer and I've got 10,000 awesome DevOps guy resumes, right? And so I have to be smart enough to understand, this resume needs to go to that project. This resume needs to go to that job, right? So as a recruiter, we miss out on so many placements, right? Because we don't understand the full scope of what we have available, and so that pooling and sharing candidates internally is very helpful, because I can just take a candidate that didn't make infrastructure, I can send him to a group chat with the other recruiters, and somebody else will pick him up and I can get credit for him. So internal pooling works. I'm not extremely convinced on large events.
Right. So we have another question, I think, that tied into, the first question that we discussed about sourcing candidates and channels for recruitment and sources for recruitment, and, just your tips on what you've seen the most success with. But I know you discussed a lot of social media there and, just traditional job postings and job sites, but which one, has been the most successful for you?
Well, working for Manning Global was our internal database CRM system. So Manning Global had been around for 20 years as a global recruitment agency, and they had built up this incredibly massive database on a global level, right? And so I could go back in at any point. My assignment would be to build a UIUX project in London, and so I would I would take my database and be able to pool an entire, group of candidates from that database. If you don't have that database available, I would recommend teaming up with a local company or organization that has one. I think I had mentioned about, a lot of these contract companies here in the States that you can call them and they have thousands of contractors on dial and you can team up with them. But also the low-lying or underdeveloped countries, really physical visits and internal networking, right? If you're trying to hire in Brazil for a change manager and you can't find one on LinkedIn, you can't find one on the job boards, just make a visit to your client, go down there, start talking to the people that work there, and I guarantee you'll find a change manager. And that's what I do miss. When I lived in Europe, I used to fly to Huawei's offices and I would get to go to London and Amsterdam and, really engage myself with these global companies and get to be immersed in the culture. So bah humbug to COVID for that. I think we might have lost our... All right, here we go. Advice for recruiters who want to move into the tech industry, healthcare, hospitality, corporate, how to land the job without prior experience. So a good way to go about that is look for RPOs, right? So recruitment process outsourcing companies. So RPOs usually have a wide variety of clients, right? So I didn't know what an RPO was. I was familiar with in-house recruitment and I was familiar with agency recruitment, but an RPO is actually a great way to get into tech recruitment. If you can find an RPO company that's hiring and get in that way because they may have healthcare and other types of clients. If anyone is looking for a job, any recruiters on here, I do have in my network a company called Hudson RPO. So, trying to hire 100 recruiters this year, tech recruiters. There are some other spaces available. So before we hang up, I just want to leave that little note out there. If any of you recruiters that joined this call would like to submit your resume, you can find me on LinkedIn and I may be able to get you a job with Hudson.
Okay, I think, yep. So I think we pretty much covered all our questions. So I hope, there's no more. If anyone else has any questions, like Jason mentioned, he's on LinkedIn. You can find him there. And if you do have, more insights to take from him, I'm sure he'll be happy to help. Thank you so much for being our guest for this webinar, Jason. I appreciate it so much, especially with all the Wi-Fi trouble I've been having and you graciously taking over so well. Thank you so much for that. It was great having you. I'd like to mention that this is the highest participation we've ever seen in our webinar so far. So that's like a great feather in my cap as well, in spite of everything that went on here. Thank you, everyone who attended. If you'd like more information about, coding assessments, engaging recruiters, space code, or, just interviewing technical talent, you can visit hackerearth.com/recruit. We do have a lot of things for technical recruiters. We deal only with technical recruiters, and we are basically matchmakers for tech recruiters and developers. So do check us out if you have anything, if any of your technical recruiting problems do resonate with us. So check us out there. Thank you so much, Jason. Again, once more, it was great having you. Thank you for all the insights and have a great rest of the day. I hope the weather is still good there in Florida.
Oh yeah, it's just getting hotter by the minute. All right, have a blessed day.
It's a relatable problem here in India.
Happy hunting, everybody. Happy hunting.
Thank you, everyone. Please fill out our survey if you have any more questions, if you'd like to see new topics on the webinars and the future sessions of This is Recruiting. And hope to see you guys soon for our next one. Thank you to everyone who attended. Thanks again, Jason. See you.
Bye.